So today I'm so excited to be joined by my first Salesforce boss, Kathleen Banashak. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm living in Florida now, not in Franklin, Tennessee, where we were when we first met, and enjoying some sunshine. We had a little bit of a lag in the sunshine in Florida, but it's good. I'm working, I'm doing some really fun projects. I love working for companies who are trying to make customer service their primary differentiator. So I'm having a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. And I was really impressed with your leadership style. And frankly, you were my first Salesforce boss. And prior to that, a lot of technical writing and a little bit of exposure to Salesforce. And I really marketed my abilities in my resume as well. But despite that, I felt very fortunate that you decided to hire me at what at the time was called Citel. We can go into the name change and all that here in a moment. But lead us up as far as your career, rewinding as far as a brief elevator pitch as to your journey through your career, like how you got started and the point where we met, and then beyond that, what you've been up to, and then we'll go from there.
All right, happy to do it. I started out my career working for a company that doesn't exist anymore. I guess they're still there a little bit, but I worked for Sears. I worked for their credit card company. And I was fortunate enough to work for an amazing group of individuals there. One in particular saw maybe a little structure in me and helped me get my project management background. My career started implementing contact center, collections, and customer service systems for Sears. Had another really strong leader see me, put me on a project. Actually, my claim to fame back in the day was we implemented the first automated dialer, and it wasn't for service, forgive me, it wasn't for sales, it was for collections. And it was a great project. And whenever I say I did anything in collections, I do get a reaction from my audience. And I always like to tell people collections is nothing more than problem solving. And actually, all work that we do is problem solving. And if you can figure out the root cause of a problem and you can solve that, you can put together a plan that gets people on board and resolves that issue. And collections was my first place to do it. I was really good at it, but that's not because I was mean or aggressive. It was because I saw each instance as an opportunity to solve somebody's problem. Anyway, so that's a little story I wanted to tell you about my collections. But going from there, so that project management background has been pretty much my stock and trade. Going further into my career, I just used that as the approach to anything. When I got to Citel, the BPO industry is a very complex and interesting and dynamic industry. I have said that if you can work successfully in the BPO industry, you can work successfully anywhere. You've got the business model for the contact center, and you have to understand that entire discipline. Then you have to understand your customers, and they could be healthcare, fintech, high tech, communications. All these clients are coming in and want you to implement their outsourcing operation or their contact center operation. And you have to understand the needs of their customers, the needs of their business inside of the contact center discipline. If you can do it well, you can be incredibly successful. And I enjoyed great success at my time in the BPO industry.
So
Great.
just one thing real quick for those scoring at home, BPO is business process outsourcing. I never had any exposure to that until I came and sat across the desk from you and you started letting me know even what that meant. So it's interesting kind of revisiting that now on having a decade plus of experience as to that. And so then from there with Citel, I think that I came along in 2012. What year were you at Citel, or when did you start there?
I joined Citel in 2006.
Okay.
And when I joined Citel, I joined on the operations side of the business. So I came in to help them with workforce management, reporting, quality, the project management office where we implemented the systems for the client operations, all of those support services. And loved it. That let me leverage that project management, business process design, sort of my skill set. And then one day, one of the leaders at Citel, Bert Quintana, came to me and said, Kathleen, we want to implement a voice of the customer project or a voice of the customer initiative. We want to really get underneath the needs of our clients. We've been doing it for our clients' customers. We want to do it for our clients. And I was like, I can't do this. I've never done this before. And Bert and I had a number of conversations about it. And I said, all right. He convinced me it was the right thing for me to do. And it just one of those places where I was worried because I'd never done anything like that in the B2B world. I'd been doing it in business to consumer as opposed to business. It was also bringing me into the sales side of the organization and the account management side of the organization, which were also very new to me. So thank goodness he saw in me those possibilities and helped me figure it out. So again, that project management discipline, that problem solving approach to things, that's the way I approached that job. And I laugh when I say, oh my gosh, going from operations to sales and account management, I can't believe I made that transition, but it was a blast. And that's the project that did it. And it was when I was working on that project that you came into my life, Mike. And that was a very
Nice.
happy day.
I'm glad that our paths crossed because I feel like that you're very instrumental in getting me exposure to big time Salesforce instances and solving difficult problems as well. So it was trial by fire. It was drinking from the fire hose and having to learn quickly for sure. And I know that there was a lot of history of Salesforce inside of Citel as well, because I saw back when I was working there that there were dates dating back to 2001 as far as when the org was spun up. And I think we were on the initial NA0 instance. That was the first, I guess, North America server that was out there, if you will. And so what year was it roughly whenever you started getting exposure to Salesforce?
It was actually at that moment, like 2012, just before you came in, that I got my first exposure to Salesforce. The company got that exposure a little earlier. Citel was actually the merge of two companies. The two companies came together in 2006, late 2006. It was Client Logic was the original organization I joined, and Client Logic bought Citel, merged the two companies, and kept the Citel name. Citel brand was a powerful brand in the industry, and it continued to be a very powerful brand. When those two companies merged, effectively, both of them had Salesforce. And like you do in a merger project, we just pushed those two together and we were moving quickly, and we didn't take the time to do a thoughtful integration of those two systems. It wasn't thoughtfully done. That it wasn't a priority at that point. When you came in, getting that instance of Salesforce clean became a priority. And a couple of things happened, actually. We lost our Salesforce administrator. And so I was assigned Salesforce administration and I had no experience with it. So my immediate response was to go out and get some expertise. And that's when I hired you. And I remember that you didn't have deep expertise, but you had the specific tech skills that we needed or that we believed we needed at the time. And if I remember correctly, I think I hired you temp to perm, if I remember correctly.
I
And
think
it
that
was
sounds right. Yeah, yeah.
and it was in a very early meeting, perhaps a week into your assignment, temp to perm, that I was certain you were going to be very quickly going to perm. And that's a meeting. I can remember sitting in the office. It was you and I and probably Mike Garrett, and I'm trying to think who else might have been there.
It may have been
And
Jill. This may have been before Michael Garrett, I think.
maybe it was just the three of us.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there and we had an issue with cleansing the data. And I remember very clearly our first priority was to cleanse the data, because as I just told you, when we went through that merger, Salesforce data wasn't our first priority. Running successful operations, interacting successfully with the clients in that joined organization, those were our priorities. At this point, we'd already taken care of that. We could then go to back office, looking at our Salesforce instance and saying, okay, what do we need to do here? And the interest that we had in our voice of the customer program in sales and account management as a discipline was to start using Salesforce as more than just a pipeline management tool. At that point, we were pretty much just managing deals. Actually, we weren't managing deals, we were managing opportunities. We were managing opportunities and an opportunity pipeline. We wanted to turn Salesforce into a true CRM where we could manage our customer relationships, as well as really manage not just the pipeline, but how those deals progressed after we won them and how they turned into long-term business and the relationship with the customers we had along the way. So we had to purge, really like reams of data. And that's the first thing that you helped us with. And it was a conversation where we had a mess on our hands. And your approach was, let's think about this completely differently. So what we were trying to accomplish and the way we were trying to accomplish it wasn't going to work. You had enough, maybe it wasn't a deep experience, but it was a spider sense that there was a better way to do it. And so we did. And from that point forward, I remember anytime there was something we wanted to do, we pulled into that same office, got that same whiteboard and said, okay, what is it we need to do? Mike, how are we going to do this? I'm not sure, but you would walk out of that office and you would go figure it out and come back. And my goodness, we had a solution, and we continued to iterate and march down the path. And we turned that application, pipeline management, people just cranking in opportunities, into a truly robust CRM. We understood how we were dealing with our relationships. We understood the success of our relationships. We understood what new opportunities were coming down the pipe that we needed to build on. It was great.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a fun trip down memory lane. And one thing that caught my eye on your LinkedIn profile is your summary. I want to actually read this because I found this to be true. And you're saying about yourself, and this is always hard to write about yourself, but this is well thought out. And I think that this is truth in advertising, is that I can bring people together, align a vision, remove noise, create structure where there is none, and lead the team to measurable, repeatable results. I will do these things in a way that helps the people on the team develop new skills and uncover skills they did not know they had. And so I can attest that being the fact for myself, because I never had any exposure to a lot of these core concerns. And the things that you were talking about was bringing back memories as far as the executive business review and how are we going to halt these opportunities at this stage so that they're profitable for the company and not just commissions for the salesperson. And then beyond that, pulse scores and customer satisfaction, and so much of a focus on those findings, looping that back through into the account so that we can learn from those findings. And then as well, the concepts such as contract leakage and realizing revenue and starting to measure behavior on Citel's website using other tools. There was a lot going on there. I'm surprised that I pulled it off, looking back on it, because those were some tall tasks, but fond memories sitting in your office. And I remember another fun memory of you is you'd be writing on your windows of your office, your cubicle or your corner office, and you had just scribbles all over your windows. I love that. And you're capturing that vision of what all you had on your plate as well. And so my goal was always to solve problems and not create problems. And so I think that hearing you talk about problem solving, serving people well, I think is a core skill that we all really need, especially moving forward, because I find that there's a lot of people with a lot of experience, and that is the go-to excuse in a lot of interviews, is people can't say, I don't want to hire you because you bore me, or you look like you're not going to be fun to work with, or you're going to cause problems, or you're going to be difficult to work with, or always have a better idea. And so that, I guess, in the interview room, what was it that caused you to decide to go with me over those that had more experience? Because I think you'd share with me after the fact, maybe a year after, I don't know when, that there were several other candidates and that I got the nod, not because of my experience. So can you speak to that specifically?
I can definitely speak to that. You did not come in and say, this is what I'm going to do inside of Salesforce. You came to me and said, what are the problems you're trying to solve? And you were trying to understand our business and think through an approach. Who are your stakeholders? What is it that the business is trying to do long term? It was more asking us about the business than it was about the technology. Once you sat down at the table, you actually knew what to do with the technology, but it was only in terms of what we were trying to accomplish with the business. So I think that your approach, who are our stakeholders? What are the problems that they're having? How can I help those people, as opposed to how can I implement Salesforce, is why we hired you.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that a lot of people get technology specific, and I'm more tech agnostic. I could care less if coming to use a Salesforce versus something else. Just let's move it forward and solve the problem. And I've always been one to say, let Salesforce do what it does best, and then let Excel do what it does best, or Oracle, or whatever the tool may be. And I think moving forward, especially now that it is a mostly cloudy environment, there's so many different systems and integrations and challenges as well. And really what struck me about you, though, was that summary of how you bring people together. You have measurable results as well. And that reminded me of when I read that, as far as Mark Benioff's, what is called the V2 MOM. It's a methodology that's to do with vision, values. This is something that predates that as well, as far as your management style is bringing a team into alignment. And that is, I think, what fascinates me with leaders, whether it's yourself or someone like a Mark Benioff, is being able to navigate conflicting priorities and keeping the big picture and the end goal in mind. And what is those above you in the org chart, frankly, what is the vision, the mission of the organization? What are the measurable goals here, and what will move the ball forward? Can you speak to if there were any, I guess I call them crucible moments, where these values that are now imprinted in your core, because it comes out in your actions a decade ago. And so this is something that you didn't just happen by. And you've talked some about developing those skills, but are there any, I guess, core memories or crucible moments to where you decided that this was the leader you were going to be? And yes, you wanted to be a leader. Even that can be a crossroads of indecision as well. But talk to me about some of those moments of doubt.
Okay. My first job was a management job. It was a line management role. Like, I was the boss and I had people who worked for me. And in a line management role, people have to do what you're saying because they're accountable to you. They work for you. They report up to you on an organization chart. And I was pretty ill-equipped to be that manager straight out of college. And I will tell you, I learned by fire. I had an opportunity as my next job after that role to be a more individual contributor. And it was in that next role where I got into project work that, and I considered myself an individual contributor because I didn't have an organization chart or anybody reporting to me. But in fact, as a project manager, it's much harder than being a line leader because you can never accomplish that project by yourself. You have to do it through a bunch of people who aren't accountable to you. And so finding out how to line up an objective, a vision that all the people that are going to help you believe in and can get excited about, and then helping them do their job in a way that makes them feel good about it and continuously want to do the things that need to be done to advance that objective. That's the talent. And that's why project management is such a great place to figure out, find the goal, but also find the goals of each one of the individuals, their organization, them as a person, and what they want to achieve. And you got to weave those things together so that they achieve the long-term enterprise goal. So that's where my style of management came from. It was a little baptism by fire and a little bit of, if I'm going to be successful, I have to find ways to make other people successful. And by the way, it feels great. So why wouldn't you continue to do that? I also had a boss at that stage of my life, still a good friend, and actually a boss of mine right now. He had a technique he would use. Whenever I would walk into his office with a problem, he would say to me, is this something you want me to help you solve? Or is this something you just want to talk about? And if it was something I wanted him to help me solve, which was probably all the time, we would sit down, get that whiteboard. In those days, it was a true whiteboard. It wasn't on the wall or on the windows. And we would map it out. And mapping out things on a board where people could participate, that became part of my course, my core tool set. And the idea of bringing everyone together and giving them an opportunity to speak, giving them an opportunity to see their ideas on a board, and then coming back and then seeing their input and how it plays a part in the long-term solution is another thing that feels good when you're doing it, and it feels good to the people who are doing it.
Yeah, I had forgotten about this, but I remember the first time you called me up to the board and I was so nervous. And I was like, man, and self-conscious of my writing and my writing style. But it was a helpful moment because I think that now, of course, I'm teaching students and I'm doing all sorts of crazy things online, and it's very visible. And that helped kind of break that shell around me, and realizing that presentation skills are key, not even for the online trainer, but for the developer or the consultant or whatever role, to be able to communicate and contribute. Because as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So that ability to diagram is paramount. And we even see that kind of speaking specifically to Salesforce now, where a lot of the automations are done through visual means, through flows. And before that was process builder and approval processes, just visualizations of how this is going to behave. And it can be very challenging. And so I appreciate you getting me out of my comfort zone there and having me go up to the board and contribute there as well. It's looking back on some of the solutions that we did. I got a list here as far as some of these things. I've alluded to that, but a lot of times these things that you came to me and the team with, such as the executive business review or pulse scores or pricing model uploads of Excel spreadsheets and into Salesforce, that one really baked my noodle. Where did those come from? Were those from up on high above leadership, or was that more some of those your brainchild that you got buy-in? Talk about that process, because oftentimes those of us deep in the weeds building a solution, we're just presented a problem and it's up to us to solve it or to code it or whatever it may be. But give us a wider picture as to what went into that thinking, as well as the potential impact and why these requests, although they may seem overly complex, what sort of impact they can have to an organization.
Yeah, I love you taking me back to this. Okay, I got the opportunity to take on this initiative of becoming a client services organization. So we were focused on sales originally, but we really wanted to build our relationships as a mechanism for driving growth in the organization. And the very first thing we decided we needed to do was hear, we called it the voice of our customers. So the very first initiative you worked on that came out of that was the Pulse. And that was Holly Hannick Weaver and me. We got in a room and we decided we just needed to do something, and we needed to do it quickly. So we very quickly mapped out a client survey, a process by which we would do it, and within a week had an approved survey and an approved delivery process for that survey. And out of the gate, within a month, we had collected all of that feedback, and then we needed help to analyze and determine what was the value of that feedback. And we realized we hadn't done everything perfectly, but we had done enough that was going to be a process that was going to move forward. So we bring you into the mix to say, okay, we're going to want to keep doing this. How can we do this more effectively, more efficiently, in a way that we could bring that data out and do something with the data and move forward? So it was quick. It was like, and it was, like I said, it wasn't perfect, but it was enough right. And I think that's what leaders have to get comfortable doing. Have an idea, have a vision of the long-term thing they want to achieve, do something, and do something quickly to build momentum and to get people excited. Show the value of that small thing that you did quickly to build momentum, and then iterate and build on it as you move forward. And that's exactly what we did there.
Right. Yeah, I really remember that first iteration. And that had some challenges because this was doing a survey and sending that out to customers before surveys were supported by Salesforce. And there wasn't much on the App Exchange. And I'm even trying to remember how I did that. It was either a web to lead or a web to case, and then you had to make that into a custom object or something. And then I remember you coming, and I'm thinking, oh, good, I'm done on that. What's next? And it's okay, next is the detractors, those that scored below a certain threshold. We're going to do something with them. And then also, oh, by the way, we want to do this. I think it was every 6 months or every 3 months or something like that. And so that way I needed to record what the prior score was and keep a history of that. So that leads to further solutioning. And had we known all that, we may have approached it different, but we wouldn't have had that level of understanding if we didn't have that level of momentum going in. And it probably would have been much more harder to implement. It probably would have led me down more too complicated of paths, if you will. And I remember some of the things that were really challenging back then, as well as pre-populating fields from a button and all these things that I think people will laugh at now that Salesforce can do. But that to me was really one of, coming from more of a tech writing background. Of course, I was used to versioning documentation, but as far as software, and this being like the 1.0 and the 2.0, and this begetting other solutions as well. And that's a sign of being on the right track, because once you start showing that around and having some quick wins and having at least some sort of metrics, then that leads to, oh, wouldn't it be cool if it could do this? And then wouldn't it be cool if it could do that? And so I think that your role in a lot of ways, even though is management and leadership, but also a lot of business analysis as well. You have a lot of different skills here across a lot of the software development lifecycle. I don't know if you've ever thought about that before or not, but and you really had an acumen as well as to understanding a lot of the limitations of Salesforce as well, or areas where I remember us talking about things and you expressing, you could tell or sense, okay, we might be getting in an area here where might hit some walls. And that, I think that was one of the nerve-wracking things for me early on that I learned to chill out about, was the nature of the game is the unknown. And especially with Salesforce, the mantra, if I could sell bumper stickers, it would be, there's always a limit. There's always going to be a limit that you hit. You think you have a solution, and then you find out, oh, wait, I can't do that, or there's a limit or whatever. And so it's definitely a career path, not for the faint of heart. But, and I'm riffing here, but this is good to remember some of this, because now I still have exposure to Salesforce, of course, because I'm training. And I also volunteer some time so I can keep my skills sharp for the Tennessee Youth Symphony. One of my sons is in that organization, so I help with their organization as well. But it is easy to get far removed from the technical challenges that we had to approach there. I remember as well, there a desire for the user interface to change and the account object to be a Visualforce page. Do you remember where that one came from and what led to that usability change as far as...
What was it again? Remind me.
Whenever the account page layouts, I guess it was for certain profiles, maybe the account managers or certain profiles, we had to do a custom Visualforce page override, and it was a tabbed interface so that it wasn't 100 fields scrollable, but there were tabs and it was all Visualforce. Do you remember that one at all?
Oh, I do. I actually think that was for sales, and that was for sales leaders to build and qualify their opportunity. Because then we built some built some workflow in there too, didn't we? That those opportunities then had to go through a process. That was the EBR, the Enterprise Business Review, where the opportunity was then presented, and a group of people said, yes, it meets the hurdle for us to go forward and make a decision that we were going to actually pursue that deal. That I do believe. So it was, I love this part of the story. Okay, so the sales guys weren't thrilled about our plan to leverage Salesforce more extensively for the work that they did. Their initial fear was that it was going to create more non-value added work. And great salespeople, and the people we were dealing with were truly great salespeople, do not want to sit and spend time entering information into Salesforce, right? They want to be out in front of their clients talking about the business and helping them understand how we could solve their problems. So we had to build that interface in a way that they saw the value of it, that they could do it very efficiently, and the value of it for them in their mind was it was laid out so I could do it efficiently, and it enabled me to get the okay so that I could go after that deal. And our ability to work as a team, me to listen to them and understand what their needs were, convey it to you, and then you'd go, you know what, I think I can do this. And you would walk out of the meeting and you would go figure out how to do it, come back, and we'd have a plan.
There you go. Yeah. And so that was what was fascinating about that, was how the challenge was that there were opportunities that weren't profitable, and even stopping forward progress. And then we matured that beyond that, not only being able to stop an opportunity before it reached a certain stage, so therefore locking it down through an approval process. And also, oh, by the way, you got to fill in these fields if you want to submit it. So these are required. that sort of thing. But then coming out of that, being able to know or maturing beyond that to where we started guiding them towards certain call centers, certain skill levels, those assets that were more profitable for the company even. And those were things I never even realized Salesforce could do until we started doing it. And so I guess the reason to go into this is to enlighten those that are watching that are newer as to how you can gain experience over time, and nothing can replace experience. My certification courses won't cut it. Getting a trial by fire, and just like Kathleen talking about learning project management skills by actually doing the thing rather than passing a certification, which I wanted to ask you, do you have any certifications, project management or otherwise?
You know what? I do not have my project management certification. I went for my MBA, and that was that was my priority. I would have been right about the time that I would have focused on getting a PMP. And so I went for my MBA instead, focused there. And there wasn't another point later on in my career where it seemed like an important thing for me to have my PMP. I've been able to be successful without it.
There you go. Yeah. So experience trumps certifications. I'm sure that MBA serves you well. It shows for sure. And so I want to ask you, and we're nearing the end here, but feel free to talk about whatever you want to talk about. But this is a question I like to ask people, is because I feel like we're in this new era with AI. And so if you were starting over, if you were fresh out of college, freshly minted college graduate, what would you do starting today if you found yourself landing in this date and time with AI seemingly everywhere? What, and knowing what you know now, having the luxury of having all this experience and wisdom, what would you do in moving forward today?
That's such a good question. Okay. You said it a little earlier about not being focused on the technology, like being technology agnostic. I think it's important, no matter what technology you're using it to solve business problems, and you're using it to solve it with people. So if you can understand the problems, if you can remove the noise, and when I say remove the noise, you wonder what that means. That means listening to enough people that you can get to the true root causes. It means taking out of the picture anything that may seem to be like a symptom, but isn't really in line between you and where you stand and the solution to that problem. So getting all that noise out of the way so that you can really focus on the answer and aligning the people who can do the work to that end goal. The other piece of what you need to do is manage your stakeholders, manage their expectations. I think that people have very lofty expectations, and you can have lofty expectations for the end game, but take short, quick interim steps to solve a problem and get that path moving, as opposed to trying to boil the ocean and in essence disappoint people in the short term because you were trying to solve the big problem like at the beginning. Take steps to solve that big problem and solve a bunch of small problems along the way. People need to focus more on the people than on the technology. You can learn the technology. Now, on the flip side, you do have to do your research, understand how that technology works. If you're in that field, of course you would do that. But even if you're on the periphery, understand how AI is solving problems, read case studies, look at the problems that have been solved. I think that's a really good way to do it. Case studies, and there are plenty of them out there, so that you can understand how technology has solved problems. Then you see a problem come your way, and you've got lots of things to think about. Oh, I can dig in there and go, I've seen this thing before. Maybe I can do something similar in this particular situation.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, it's a good way. I've seen this. I've seen something that looks like this before. Now I have an idea where I can get started. I think that's a very good way for young people or people that are new in their career, because not only young people are new in their career. I was very new in an element of my career at a very advanced age, if you will. They put me into sales and account management in an advanced age. You could teach this old dog a new trick, and I had a blast doing it.
Man, it was fun. It was a good time, and really appreciate you as a leader. Really fortunate that I crossed paths with you, frankly, and I don't think I would be here without you. So I just want you to know that. And then I guess at some point, Citel was bought. Can you explain? The name now is, what's the name now? I'm not kept up.
Yeah, Citel, the company, was rebranded to Found Ever, and I think it was just a little earlier this year.
Okay. Okay. So I don't feel so bad not keeping up because it was recent. So
It's relatively recent. And let me just tell you another kind of a thing that has been a platform for me is you can pretty much do anything you want to do. Finding the way to do something is the smart way to approach business. It's early in my career, my boss at the time will laugh when he hears me, if he ever heard me say this, I called it the can-do attitude. And looking for people who have the can-do attitude, I think has been one of my mechanisms for surrounding myself with people like you. I was looking for a can-do attitude in our interview, and you showed it. If you hadn't, you and I never would have gotten together and we wouldn't be having this wonderful conversation. So whatever questions I was asking and whatever I was listening to you say back to me, I was looking for, are you going to go find a way to do it? Or are you going to tell me the reasons why it can't be done? Because anything can be done given enough time, enough money, right? Then you get to decide, is that the way we want to do it? Is it still worth doing? But things can be done. Taking that attitude and figuring out, maybe there's 2 or 3 different ways to get that done. What's the best one? What's the one that's going to get us the closest to the goal? What's the one that we can afford? What's the one that's going to fit into our time frame? Whatever. Then you've got information you can use to make decisions. That's the right way to approach it. But you had the can-do attitude.
excellent. Love to hear it. And I learned that through a lot of experience and being surrounded by leaders that predated you as well, that used to really stress me out, where I'd be in meetings and they would be saying, yeah, we can do that. And then on the ride back to the office, okay, Mike, we got to figure out how to do that. I'm like, what do you mean? You just said we could do it. I know we can. So
I know we can. What they were saying is pretty much the same thing I'm saying. They knew it could be done, and they knew if there was someone who could help them do it, you could. And I learned that as well and enjoyed great success as a result.
excellent. So Kathleen, I'm going to turn the tables. What can I do better?
Oh my goodness. You did tell me that you were going to ask me that question. I don't know how to answer. I'm not working with you right now.
Right.
I know the things that, you know what? I haven't seen a lot from you.
Hmm.
Perhaps maybe a stronger presence on LinkedIn
Okay.
with what's happening with your, and maybe it's not coming into my feed, or but maybe it's showcasing some of your students and some of the things that they did do after their certification with you. Hey, Joe landed this job doing blah blah blah. Or ask those your students who have gotten their certifications and have found great careers. Tell me some of the problems that you solved. Pull those together and push those out.
Yep.
Get yourself out there.
Yep. I love it.
You're
So
doing a lot of magic through other people. You could be
mhm.
showcasing that magic.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm going to get in your algorithm. Okay. So be watching for that. I'm they get in there
All
and you're
right.
like, okay, you took it to heart. So I'm going to take that to heart. And Kathleen, thank you so much. Class act, very talented. And thank you so much for spending time with me today. And let me know if there's anything you ever need. Don't hesitate to ask. And just thank you so much.
Been great spending time with you, Mike. Take
All
care.
right. All right.